Okay, my name's Rusty Lacy. I grew up in a small town in northeast Texas of about 10,000, and it was a pretty closed community. They kind of kept out the college, afraid of the riffraff. They was fairly religious, had like maybe 15 or 20 churches in the town. Actually, we lived in the old part near the center where our property backed up to one church, and up the hill 2 blocks was the church we and our cousins next door went to. My parents attended church, but I would not call us a deeply religious family. I never really saw them study the Bible or do things other than maybe read a little pre-prepared Sunday school lesson the night before type of thing. But they loved people and helped people and stuff. So it was a loving home. There were no kids really in my neighborhood either. And so I ended up kind of entertaining myself. So I wanted to be part of the group. I was a little bit of a follower, if you will. Was picked on some at school, so wanting to not miss out, wanting to be a part, feeds into my testimony here. Because at age 9, an event happened that I had not planned, but it set me on a road of fear, if you will, where Satan kind of had me kind of bondaged from saying anything. So at age 9, what happened was I was seeing all these peers, these kids that went to school with and church with, going forward, and there'd be some church jargon of membership by baptism or something to do with receiving Christ. And I felt like I was supposed to go up. Now, so one Sunday night, it was during a revival, there was no one between me and the end of the pew. I get up and I start to leave, and my parents thought I was going out the back of the church and go to the restroom or something, and I start down front. What prompted me, I don't know. I felt like I needed to do this. Well, I get down there, and a lady that would eventually be one of my school teachers, I knew her, started asking me these questions, and I'm going, oh my goodness, what have I done? Type of thing. So you imagine this little 9-year-old boy. So they didn't ask why I was down there. They kind of asked, did you receive whatever? And I would just go, yeah. I just wanted to get out of there. So I was doing all this. Well, I get home going, whew, and then Mom says, oh, by the way, you're being baptized next Sunday. I went, what? So I'm sitting there, and in my simplistic way, I'm asking God to kind of save me. I wanted to maybe feel something or some reassurance. I didn't know the full story of Christ well at that point to know what I was doing. So I just kind of went through the whole 9 yards and didn't want these people with little hair like me or whatever to say, oh, well, he did wrong or something, or my peers to laugh. So I just kept on this process. And my parents would go to church, but anytime something came up, I was fine to stay home. That's fine with me, And my parents never asked me, didn't interact with me on this or anything. And this just kept going on year after year. And of course, I quickly figured out really what I needed to do, and I believed in Christ and his forgiveness and stuff. But I couldn't bring myself to come out, to express myself. So finally, this is age 9, finally 2 weeks before my 17th birthday. So you can imagine all this time, I'm kind of avoiding things, I'm doing minimal at church, everything. An evangelist comes and talks about people, kind of like me. God set that one up, I'm sure. And so the verse for today is Romans 10:9-10, that if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it's with your hearts that you believe and are justified, but it's with your mouth that you confess and are saved. And even though I believed and had faith and talked to God before that, I look at that day as my spiritual birthday, May 1st of 1980, because I came forward and, man, that was such an experience. It's like the weight had been lifted, but if you think about the conference today, you can imagine having no interaction or much, how these things can happen. So I kind of quickly went from one end of the spectrum to the other and got involved in a little of everything. So it's how God used that and prepared me to do why I'm up here today and talking with y'all. I wanted to share that part, but I got to go back before age 9 even. Now I said it was a very closed community and stuff, and I didn't see people from other places, other countries, anything. Well, at age 5, right across the street, God plants this retired Methodist missionary, this lady, and she has with her a 14-year-old Indian boy, because she had served in India, named Johnny. I think he was the first to get this particular type of visa to be able to come. So here I am interacting with him. He's about 9 years older. He's still living up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But I started seeing slideshows of India and all this stuff, and I just think of how God started introducing culture into my life in a very close community. Now, my cousin's a next-door neighbor. He was a deacon in our church, and him and his wife, very godly people. They actually was my Sunday school teachers some of the initial years after I became Christian, and they poured into me. They still make this little booklet today. I got this book that the Baptists put out called The Survival Kit for New Christians, and it had memory verses and some quiet times and stuff. So I was kind of making up for lost time, if you will. So I really got into the memorization. You'll find out a lot more about that this afternoon. And for the next 8 or 9 years, I memorized quite a lot, actually. And some of that led to this darling lady over here liking me. That'll be also this afternoon. But the first few years, I went to the local college after my senior year, and there was a building that said Baptist Student Center. So I walked in and started getting involved, and actually for 8 whole years, my undergraduate and 3 years of graduate school, I was involved in that. So I got kind of a double tenure, if you will. God was determined I was going to learn it one way or the other, I think. But anyway, halfway through that, after 5 years, I gave a summer to the Lord as a summer missionary, and went and worked with the Hispanic culture on the border, and that's where I met my darling wife. She had been a missionary, summer missionary before, and was helping out the church that summer. Continuing on, graduate school, many things happened. The first 3 years were part of the Baptist student ministry, and I got into some leadership with that. And we got into, between that and my church, got into a lot of different ministries and meeting a lot of people. We went out to the port of Houston and ministered to sailors there and would do services there. We would do things with inner city kids. We would go do services with some of the homeless people that maybe were alcoholics or on drugs and stuff. So God was kind of preparing me to work with people. I stopped memorizing because I couldn't keep it up in 88 or 89, about the time my wife and I got married, because I was trying to get out of graduate school. I was able to keep the quiet times up, but I couldn't keep that up. Well, God was determined to work with me. So about a year or so after we got married, John Mann became my associate pastor, who undergirded a lot of this stuff, so he started pouring into me. But one key thing he did, just as I was leaving to go off to do a postdoc at a university and leave the state of Texas, was to give me the topical memory system. So that restarted my memorization, and those verses were very important in the next few years, which I'll also explain this afternoon to keep this short. Then, the final thing I'll tell you how God prepared me is we went about 3,000 kilometers. We were still in the United States, but we went to the northern part, to the Canadian border. So I met her on the Mexico border, and then we went together to the Canadian border. So God was moving me around and trying to get me interested. Well, when I got up there, you'd be amazed at how God provided. The little Baptist church up there, now I went as an undergraduate at Texas A&M University. The pastor there was praying for a trumpet player. I do play at trumpet. I'm not that good, but Did pretty good in high school. Well, Dale was from Texas. He had engineering degrees like I do, very similar, from Texas A&M. And he'd been discipled by John Mann. So imagine you go 3,000 kilometers to another tiny town, 10,000, and find someone that knows where you grew up, roughly, has similar degrees, and was discipled by someone who discipled you. We arrived there at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning with this car and big trailer. His church gets out, and here comes a half a dozen or more guys, and they moved all my furniture out and up to the second floor apartment. God's provision was amazing. But the other side of the story was, in my research group was the guy who's in charge, or the president of the Chinese students. We ended up having a evangelistic Bible study with a bunch of Chinese and one Indian guy, and that president, his wife became a Christian, her father back in China became a Christian. He got caught up, struggled with the concept of baptism a little bit, but he may have eventually become a Christian. So God was showing me and bringing people from all types. When I started graduate school, there was 13 of us, only 4 were Americans. So God has put me around people of all types of culture, given me opportunities to minister, and put John and different ones in my life to prepare me for what I'm doing now. So I really praise God for his provision and preparation in my life. So with that, I'll let my wife have the rest of the time.
Hi, good morning. I'm Cindy Lacy. I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas. I was not raised in a Christian home. We went to church occasionally when I was growing up. I'm the youngest of 4 people, by the way, 4 children. We went to church occasionally when I was growing up, but by the time I was 10, we had all stopped going to church except for my mother, who was a Christian but never shared her faith with anybody, not even with us. My parents were not... they never complimented me or anything or supported me with anything. They were not physically affectionate with me. So when I became a teenager, I had a very poor self-image. I can't blame it all on them. But I started searching for ways to fill up this emptiness inside of me, to make myself feel meaningful. I made good grades in school. That didn't satisfy. I did athletics. That didn't satisfy my inner being. I had 2 siblings that got involved with alcohol and drugs and running away and being very rebellious. I knew that was not the way to happiness. In 1980, I went off to college, Texas A&M University, with the expressed intent in my mind that I was going to find a better way of life. I had no idea it would lead to a life with Jesus Christ. At that point, I didn't even believe God existed. I didn't believe in heaven or hell. I didn't believe in the Bible. The first person I ever met on campus, I was standing in line waiting to pay my tuition. And I started chatting with the young man ahead of me, and his name was David. And this university that semester had 29,000 people, students in it, big university. And he and I looked at each other's schedules, and we had 2 classes together. It was amazing. So I thought, yay, I know a classmate. So the first day of school, we sat together in class, and we started talking, just chatting. Well, he invited me to the Baptist Student Union, now called Baptist Student Ministries. They have a noon Bible study every day, Monday through Friday. I didn't know what a Baptist was. I wasn't interested in Bible study, but for some reason I went. And what impressed me was not what they were saying about the Bible, but how loving and caring and genuine everybody was. They clearly cared for one another. I'd never seen that kind of affection and love in people before. David and I continued to chat off and on when we saw each other. About 2 weeks later, we were walking across campus, and we sat down on a bench outside of my dormitory. And he pulled out a pocket New Testament out of his back pocket and read me John 3:16, and then started going and reading verses in Romans. And trying to be polite, I tried to look over to see what he was reading. He was so nervous, his hands were shaking, the words were moving. I couldn't read what he was saying. It turns out, I found out later, he was quoting them all from memory, okay? And when he got done, he said, just ask Jesus into your heart, just ask Jesus into your heart, and you'll be saved. And then he got up and fled, okay? And I was absolutely stunned. I had no idea what he was talking about. I did not understand how someone that was tortured and died on a cross 2,000 years ago had anything to do with me today. It completely baffled me. Over the next few weeks, David continued to share with me off and on as we saw each other. And one day, I was walking across campus. This was in October of 1980. And all of a sudden, all the pieces about the gospel message fell into place like a jigsaw puzzle. And the key to me was understanding the power of the resurrection. Because Jesus conquered sin and death. And as it says in John 11:25, I am the resurrection and the life. I finally had figured out what it all meant. So I ran back to my dormitory. I got on my knees and I prayed to receive Christ. I need to tell you one other story first that I forgot. It was very important. Before I prayed that prayer, I came to the Baptist Student Union one day. And this was after David had witnessed to me on the park bench. And he saw me walk in and he grabbed my hand and pulled me back into a prayer room and said, I found a verse this morning in my quiet time that I think really pertains to your problem. And I was like, what's going on? And I interrupted him and I said, David, why are you doing this? I could have just as easily said, what are you doing? Because I didn't know that either. But he looked at me straight in the face and said, I'm doing this because I care. And that's when I knew Christianity was what I needed to fill that void in my heart. So a month later, when I prayed to receive Christ, I was filled with the joy and the peace and the meaningfulness that I am saved and I am loved. And it was awesome. It's been awesome ever since. In the 44 years since then, I have been a missionary to Mexico. I have also been a nurse. I worked full time with terminally ill patients for 6 years. We have moved across the country twice. We have lost a daughter. I have had cancer. There's a lot of things we've gone through, but Christ has always been there. The peace and the love, how it has always been there. How it's prepared me today. I've always been kind of behind the scenes and in a supportive role, a lot like a nurse is instead of a doctor like Dr. Chip over here. I'm in a supportive role. I've done a lot of caretaking with family and my mother-in-law, and I'm still doing that here. And I want to leave you with a final verse, and this is Romans 15:13. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Thank you.